Democrats want to impeach Donald Trump. I think they need to listen to Bernie Sanders, because I think this is fraught with difficulty and may not work out the way I think they think it may work out. Welcome to the Soapbox. So it started on the fringe left as this thing of impeach Trump has now started to be taken up by the mainstream of the party itself. Impeach Donald Trump, impeach Donald Trump. It's this racket of noise about impeaching Donald Trump. I think this is lunacy, and yet the mantra has gone louder still. Mueller came out to Mueller said he wasn't going further than what was already in the document. I guess he gave clarity on his document. And from that point on, Democrats have been screaming about impeachment. But again, nothing has changed. The variables that were there before are the same variables that we're working with now. But the truth of the matter is they wanted impeachment beforehand. This was already a foregone conclusion. They've just been working themselves up into a frenzy, one after the next, one kind of giving themselves a fever of such. Elizabeth Warren, I suspect, went with this notion because she wanted to kind of... This is a primary contest. And if they can get their base worked up into a frenzy, impeachment is somewhat of a Hail Mary pass to do so. Take a listen to all of these guys talking about impeachment. This is Chris Hayes, Cory Booker.
Who looks at the politics of this? It's a thorny path, but I think history is going to look back at this moment and what we choose to do and see if we did the right thing. And I think the right thing right now is to hold this president accountable for his actions.
We have to get the show on the road. We have to have these investigations done on TV under the banner of an impeachment inquiry. I don't think there's any way around that.
Make everybody vote. Make everybody in the House vote. Send it over to the Senate. Make them vote. Put them on the record and make them live with those votes for the rest of their lives.
Impeachment is a process, not a thing. They need to move toward it strategically, and they need to make sure they're bringing the American people along with them.
I would suggest that he told us enough to interpret what he said as a referral for impeachment.
Mueller did no such thing. Mueller did no such thing. None of the variables have changed. This was already a preconceived notion. They knew what they wanted to do beforehand. And to some degree, they've been out-edging themselves, especially with the primary process coming up. They've been kind of out-ranking themselves or out-pushing themselves on this particular issue. Nancy Pelosi has been hesitant to go about this. And I suspect Nancy Pelosi's political acumen on this is right. Sanders, on this particular point, I suspect, is probably in agreement with Pelosi. Listen to what Sanders said when this woman asked him about impeachment.
How do you feel about starting impeachment proceedings based on yesterday's testimony? As a Democrat, it's very frustrating to think we're just got to wait until you or one of your colleagues wins in 2020.
Yep.
That is how our electoral system works. That is how our electoral system works. Yes, you have to wait for 4 years. It sucked under Bush. It sucked under other presidents, I'd imagine. But yes, you have to wait 4 years. It's the way the process works. This notion of trying to take out the president with some kind of Hail Mary around this behind-the-scenes stuff is a little dicey. And you should be bothered by that yourself. I mean, I'm sorry, that's a detour. Let's stay on task.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, here is Nancy Pelosi does not have an easy job. Okay, and that is one of the reasons she does not. Here are the dynamics there. I believe you got two conflicting tendencies there, and I think they can be resolved. Number one, this president is not above the law. No president is above the law. This president must be held accountable.
Just as a short aside, and I'll start this back from the beginning because I don't want to intrude too much upon this, but I have to be honest, I don't like Trump. Don't misunderstand me. This is not a rah-rah for Donald Trump in the least. I do not like Trump. I need to stress that. This has nothing to do about Trump, though. How does George Bush walk? How does George Bush walk? How do you have somebody invade a country in this way and walk? And you're telling me about Trump. Like, that grates. I have a hard time reconciling those two things. That one guy was out there torturing people, and yes, that's against the law, and at the very least, he said he was doing it. So yeah, the other guy confessing to something that's against our laws. Not to mention invading a country on something that ended up being a lie. Cooking the books. 1 million people died in that war. But Donald Trump. I don't like Trump, so this is not this thing for Donald Trump. But God, man, I don't know how there's this much animosity for Trump while simultaneously Bush is out there finger painting. This sweetheart pose of Michelle Obama giving a war criminal a piece of candy. But yeah, Trump. Let's start this from the beginning. I'm sorry.
President is not above the law. No president is above the law. Wait for a mic. I think there's a mic on the way.
How do you feel about starting impeachment proceedings based on yesterday's testimony? As a Democrat, it's very frustrating to think we're just got to wait until you or one of your colleagues wins in 2020.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good question. All right. Here is Nancy Pelosi does not have an easy job. Okay, and that is one of the reasons she does not. Here are the dynamics there. I believe you got two conflicting tendencies there. And I think they can be resolved. Number one, this president is not above the law. No president is above the law. This president must be held accountable. And I believe that the Judiciary Committee should begin impeachment inquiries. Inquiries, all right? Now, that's not impeachment. That is to determine, it's the first step.
He's being forced to this position, by the way. He's being forced to this position. This is not a position he's taken easily. He's been forced to it. Why do I think he's being forced to the position? The other participants in the race have started screaming about impeachment. He's going through a Democratic primary. He understands that the Democratic Party, in this case, is on this kind of impeachment fever, and they're somewhat Trump deranged, and they are on this impeachment kick. What do? Do you stand against the tide in the sense of saying, I'm completely against impeachment, completely against it, I don't want this part? No, you don't. You can't take that position. I guess you could take that position, but that position, it's such an outlier in a situation where, at the very least, you want to remain even with the rest of the pack on this case. You want to make your grounds or your inroads on things that are not impeachment. So this is not necessarily the argument you want to have. You want to, at the very least, be even on this case of, okay, let's start an inquiry. But, let's start talking about this income inequality and that type of stuff. He's taking this position because he has to take this position. I could be wrong. But let's listen to what he says after that, which is why I think I'm right.
To determine whether or not Trump has committed impeachable offenses. Now, you may not like Trump. I don't like Trump. That's not an impeachable offense. You got to do that. Okay. And so I support the beginning of those inquiries. But here is the danger, which I think Nancy Pelosi and many people are struggling with. It may well be that Donald Trump wants to be impeached because he knows that in the Senate, you know what you need? 2/3 of the United States Senate. You all know that. Need 67 votes to impeach Trump. And right now there are 47 Democrats, and not all of them today would impeach Trump. So to go through the scenario where you go through month after month of impeachment debate, let's just say, and I'm not sure that how it would turn out, if a majority would, but let's assume they do, comes to the Senate. And go through another period of time, and the Senate does not impeach Trump, which is likely. And the American people in the middle of all of that are saying, hey, I can't afford health care. My kid can't afford to go to college. What are you doing to the veterans, for the veterans of this country? What are you doing about climate change? Why aren't you raising the minimum wage? Why are you just worried about Trump all of the time? Do you understand my point? All right, so that is the dilemma. We cannot allow Trump or any other American president to be above the law, and we've got to pursue that. But if the challenge will be to walk down two paths simultaneously, not so easy, okay? We cannot make ordinary Americans think that we have forgotten working longer hours for lower wages, that they can't afford health care, that their kids can't go to college, that climate change is not a huge issue. You follow what I'm saying? So that is the difficult challenge that we face, not to fall to do something that Trump, in fact, may end up wanting us to do.
All right, so I absolutely agree with him. Not just because he's Bernie Sanders, but I actually agree with him on this. I think I've said as much earlier before I think I might even said it before Sanders said it. And there's a few parts that I want to add to it. It comes across as a witch hunt. That's the first part. It comes across as a massive witch hunt. Most of the public. I had a conversation with my mom. I think this was maybe a couple of days ago, when Mueller gave his speech. And she was like, you got to listen to what Mueller said. They're going to go after Trump. They're going to go after Trump. And as we were talking about this, I think we were maybe 30 minutes in, and I kind of asked her, your mom is in a situation where you're spending a lot of your time just taking care of her. Now, the other people in the family are getting older and are forced to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet, despite being in their elderly age. Why are we talking about this? Like I understand that you believe that Donald Trump should be impeached, but you thought that, on day one. So let's be honest. Anything that they came back with, you were going to scream that these guys need to be impeached. So that's the first point. But that's more of a Democrat issue. I don't think that's a country issue. And part of the reason that Donald Trump got elected in the first place, to some degree, was this gap between the political apparatus versus the public. Meaning, what the public wanted is not being expounded within the political space. And the frustration between those things. You can look at it in Brexit or Bolsonaro getting elected, or in Italy with the 5-star getting elected. You can see it all across the world. It's not just here in the United States. My point is this. Picking a fight on something that is extraordinarily shaky as this notion of obstruction of justice. Because understand what we're talking about. The Democratic Party asserted that Donald Trump was working with the Russian government in order to hack the election and collude to stop Hillary Clinton from winning the election. This was found to be a conspiracy theory. Now, despite this being found to be a conspiracy theory, they say that Donald Trump obstructed justice. Now, justice in this case would assume that there was something going on and Donald Trump was trying to stop them from finding that thing that was going on, but there was nothing that was going on. So it's this weird case of, okay, we didn't catch you for doing the thing that we said you were doing, but you were trying to stop us from finding out that there was nothing to find out. And so we're going to impeach you for that. And the public is supposed to get on board with this. Like this, it's so shady that it becomes divisive in and of itself. You're never going to convince Trump supporters, so there's going to be 30% of the population that's against you, maybe 30% of the population for you that hates Trump. But my point is, you create this kind of divisive environment going into the election. Now, if your name is one Bernie Sanders, this is not necessarily the best grounds for you because you're not necessarily involved in this. Your argument that you want to get back to is this notion of income inequality. I want to expand Social Security, healthcare, etc., etc. I want to do things for the society itself. having all of the space sucked up with this notion of a political fight that's going for the next 2 or 3 years with impeachment. They're never going to impeach him in the Senate, meaning it's going to be off or not. It's going to be the House of Representatives, and it's going to die there. While the other issues just kind of go on the wayside. Even my mom, hearing this argument of, with all of the problems that avail you and all of the things that you need help with and assistance with, how does impeachment factor into this? It doesn't at all. It's just information to you. It doesn't matter whether they impeach him or they don't impeach him. Nothing in your life is tangibly changed by that thing that takes place somewhere else. For all intents and purposes, you don't even know if it's real. It could be something that they could be putting on television for you for all that it affects you. I guess I'm trying to make this point to her and to, I guess, the audience in general. The things that tangibly affect an individual's life, those are the things that needs to be discussed and needs to be talked about. Having impeachment suck up all the air out of the room, this just seems like a dicey political strategy. What I can't necessarily tell, though, is if running in a presidential election going up in 2020, if Donald Trump is facing an impeachment hearing, is this to his benefit or to his detriment? If you're running around the country saying, this is a witch hunt, this is a witch hunt, I told you it was a witch hunt, they found me, no collusion, and yet they're still trying to impeach me. Is that argument, does that win? Does that sustain? Meaning, does it look so dicey that enough of the population says, yeah, this is a witch hunt, I don't want to deal with that? Because ultimately, if you're running in the political race, that is going to suck up all the air out of the room if that's what the Democratic Party is trying to do. I don't know if that wins. I don't know if any president want to be fighting an impeachment hearing. I mean, that's a little dicey. By the same token, there are some positions where you take kind of a counter position just because that's your better off position. You can't necessarily run on your record, so you run almost against the party that seems to be coming after you unfairly and unjustly. I don't know. I strongly suspect that Nancy Pelosi knows this, and she's being pushed strongly by elements of her party from the left itself, but from elements in the Democratic presidential space. These guys are trying to get to the left of Sanders in many respects. And Ocasio going with this notion of impeachment as if that's somewhat of a progressive position. That's not a progressive position. That's a position that she's just so happened to take. There's a difference in those things. But I think they need to listen and be very careful on this. Like, honestly, I think Trump should be beaten in an election. If there's a segment of the population, 20%, that flipped between Trump and Obama, that section is not ungettable. That section may be ungettable if it believes that you're going after him in somewhat of a witch hunt. By the same token, it seems like shooting fish in a barrel to run against Donald Trump from the standpoint of the record that Donald Trump has racked up. It's one failure after the next. I mean, he's not going to pass the tax cut, but look, here's the tax cut that he passed. You know, this is outright betrayal from the standpoint of the way he said he was going to govern versus the way he was governing. Like, this seems to be shooting fish in a barrel, but for whatever reason, they are getting dragged into this particular direction. I strongly suggest that Nancy Pelosi does not want to do this, and I suspect she's right. But we'll see. I mean, I cover it either way, so. All right, I'll end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.